Well, hello and welcome to the On It Not In It podcast, the interview series. I'm your host, Todd Expert, and today I'm joined by Terrence McCarron, who is the CEO and founder of OpinionRoute. Terrence, thank you so much for joining us. Would you like to kick us off with a brief background as to who you are and what you do?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me on, Todd. I am, as you said, the owner of a company called OpinionRoute. I'm up here in Cleveland, Ohio. We service market research companies in what's called the insights industry. It's a giant but pretty unknown type space, but we love to be a part of it. We are a survey operations company, but also a technology platform for those market research agencies.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, it's little known, right? We get all these surveys. Where do they come from? Obviously, they come from places like OpinionRoute. Awesome. Good to know. So you've been at this for about 10
Except
years.
for the really annoying ones, Todd. We don't do those ones. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. The ones where they keep bugging you, right? We don't
Yeah,
like.
exactly. That's on us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. The ones that say, would you be willing to answer one question? And it really turns into 42 questions.
Definitely not us.
Yeah.
Definitely not us.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So looking through the business, you've been in the business for about 10 years now, a little over 10 years. So I want to take you back in time and I want to ask you the question of what was the spark that kicked you into entrepreneurship world?
Yeah, a lot of times when I speak with other business owners or people that's, began startups, they always have a story about, oh, I just knew that this was my future. They love telling stories of, I was a C student and I knew I was going to make my own way in the world. That was not me, right? I am very much a guy that loved being part of companies. I loved being a soldier in the company, very much on the sales side. I had the blessing of being part of some wild success stories in our industry, technology-oriented companies that went from very little to huge exits. And I was happy. I was doing great. I think for me, I hit a point in my career about 15 years in where I started seeing some things because of my experience that I had the vantage point to be able to spot in our industry that had me worried about some of the challenges my core relationships in the industry would have to face. And the companies I've been with really were on this awesome automation path, but really the core client, the market research agency, was not participating in that. So I started looking around like, oh, there's going to be somebody to kind of solve these problems I anticipated. And I couldn't find anybody that was really focused on what I was seeing. So I struggled for a few months because I felt almost like this calling, right, to be the one to fill that void, but I was happy, right? I had a great job. My family was doing great, very comfortable living in New Jersey at the time. But ultimately, it just kind of consumed me. I had an idea I thought could help, and I decided to take the leap. And it was a big personal change too, right? We sold our house in New Jersey. My wife and I moved our 4 kids to Cleveland, Ohio. So we had a more affordable lifestyle in the Midwest to be able to fund a startup. And we were off to the races. Most people thought I was crazy, but a decade later, it's been great.
Yeah, so actually, I think you say your story is different than most entrepreneurs. I actually think the more entrepreneurs I talk to, yeah, a lot of people, something happens or they're born an entrepreneur because they're an entrepreneurial family or whatever. But your actual story matches a lot of others, where you said there was a problem in the world that you searched for the solution and nobody was doing it, right? And so I think that's how most entrepreneurial businesses that start up and go, that's really where they start, is you got to find the problem that you're trying to solve first, right?
Yeah. Well, you make me feel a lot better, Todd. So thank you. But, at the end of the day, it was kind of a little heady moment for me. I was very happy to plug in and then amplify someone else's like hard work of getting the brand established and off the ground and all those logistics, right? That are a lot more than you think when you make the decision to jump. So for me, it was definitely a humbling exercise. But yeah, I mean, then I guess I'm pretty well aligned because there was definitely some problems I saw that I thought needed fixing for sure.
Got it. Excellent. Excellent. So let me pivot and ask you a different kind of question, which is, okay, so you started your business. You probably had some preconceived notions of what it was going to look like. So why don't you share a couple of misconceptions with us and how did you solve them?
Yeah, I think the one idea that I had is just that I had an idea. I have this great idea, so therefore it's going to work, right? I knew from my industry experience that it could work. What I underestimated was it was less, a successful startup is less about just the original spark or the original concept, but it's really how you execute that. And building the organization and the team and building repeatable processes that multiple people can do, I think was one of the hard things. I was a solopreneur for about 2 years. So I did everything, which is still paying dividends now. Because I started hiring up, I had to train people to take things off my plate. And I think that was one of the biggest learnings I had. It wasn't, the idea was good, right? But that was not 90% of it by a long stretch. It was just the beginning. And that's where the work really kicked in.
Yes, that's a good transition. So you scaled your business by bringing people on, building processes, training them up, the things you were just saying. That's a good transition to the, you've got it. We talked a little bit before the podcast started recording, and you have over 30 employees now. Congratulations on your success. So now you've got a big team in small business world. But what are the challenges you're dealing with now?
Yeah. Or more people, more problems, right? Someone told me back in the day that when you hit 10 employees, that's where your world changes. And, that was about right for me. And so the last 2 years in particular has been about, I have a lot of great people. We've really, I mean, it's incredible what talent we've been able to attract, both in the industry, in the area, but totally other places too. So I feel really grateful for that and people's trust in us. But for me, the last 2 or 3 years was about building a leadership team, right? So this is where I had to really get out of my comfort zone and stop being the guy that loved solving all the problems, stop being the one that, oh, I know how to do that. I had to let go and let other leaders come in, build more systems and processes that I never got to, but also coach talent on a way to think through things themselves, right? Really empower people. So I have to sit on my hands a lot more than I'm comfortable. But it sparked me having to get to a different phase of my own personal journey of sort of delegating and being comfortable with that. It's made a lot easier though, because of the leadership team we've been able to build. I would go to bat in any environment with the people we have right now. But yeah, that letting go part, I think if you interviewed them, they would tell you, Terrence thinks that he's got to let go of this. And that tension is really healthy for me, but for the company overall too.
Yeah, I love that. And the podcast is called On It, Not In It. And you're talking
Yeah.
about working on your business. When you're building your team out, when you're delegating, when you're building systems, repeatable things you can scale, that's working on your business. And so I think that will really resonate well with a lot of our entrepreneurs. It's tough to give up the control, the being the answers guy, for lack of a better world. And it sounds like you've pushed through some of those obstacles, and that's what's helped you be successful, which is awesome. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. I think for me, it's what's helped is being more mission focused as a business, right? So I really believe in what 10 years later we're still trying to build and do for our target clients. So connecting more to that mission on a day-to-day basis and not the how as much has been really freeing.
Excellent. Love that. So the world is obviously constantly evolving. We've recently dealt with the pandemic thing. I think that's starting to get in the rearview mirror a little bit for a lot of people, but economic ups and downs. Now we got the big AI thing, and what's that going to do to industry and all the things. So we're constantly just having to deal with everything changing. That's the one certainty in life. Everything changes, right?
Oh, no doubt.
So how do you stay innovative? Just out of curiosity at OpinionRoute.
Yeah, and it's an important question, especially the AI point is making everyone look in the mirror about what they do and how they do it. I'm I guess it's fair to call myself a rabid consumer of content. I'm a voracious reader. Love podcasts, right? Love a good podcast. And, from my standpoint, I am less focused. So the way I do it is I'm less focused on learning about a new company or a new feature or new technology. And I'm more focused about new philosophies or new ideas, right? So that's where AI has become really fascinating for me because we have this promise, right? Maybe this hype a little bit around it. But then how does that idea translate to the way the world spins today in our industry or beyond? So I love breaking those things down and trying and experimenting a little bit. So we have a bit of an experimentation budget every year that we play. Our core platform, having everything in one place and what we built and how we do work has give us a playground really to sort of deploy different things. And we love to fail. We love to fail fast and then learn from that too. So for me, it's more about a discipline, attaching more to the ideas behind innovation, and then trying to be the one that comes up with a new angle, really. I think we are an agent of innovative change in our industry. So we're more on the side of trying to help our clients get comfortable with the new way of thinking. But that's how I go about it.
Excellent. I love that. So not to you've built yourself a little sandbox that you can play in. It's a controlled environment where you can test new things, try new things. I love the statement that you also made. We love to fail fast, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people hang on to that idea for too long. And what you're talking about is, hey, try the idea, but if it doesn't work, then allow yourself to fail fast. Move on to something new.
And maybe it's because of the way that idea was executed is the reason why I failed, but the concept, right? The philosophy could work if just tweaked, right? So for me, that's always a thing. We don't like try and disprove things and then kill it for good. We just iterate off of that. And it is fun. It brings an element of smiles and kind of like, isn't this cool? A lot of geek out sessions that we have, within our different, pockets within the organization. It makes it really fun.
Excellent. Yeah, I like that. So you got to try new things, and there's not in your like your process. I don't want to overemphasize this, but a couple things that you did mention that I want to go back to. So voracious consumer of new information, right? You got to be learning all the time, and then you got to try things, and then you need to fail fast, and then if you need to just tweak, that's how you do it. And so I love it's a pretty simple process, but a lot of people miss that. Either they don't learn new things fast, or they stick on to ideas too long. So I think that's great feedback for our listeners. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to do it.
Yeah. So just curious, and again, please don't share anything that's anything proprietary or that's confidential. But can you offer a glimpse to our listeners into what the future holds for your business and for yourself?
Yeah, happy to do that. I think a lot of what we're doing over the next 3 to 5 years really started coming to light in the industry at the end of last year. So we built the company much like we've been talking about here, defining SOPs, making them repeatable and measurable, and then ultimately presenting that in our internal technology that governs all of our work, right? We call that the Navigator. And I think we did that just because we thought it was best practices and we kind of a unique spin on how to do the work. So we wanted to really codify that as we hired new people so they could learn quickly. And then over the last few years, it became really clear as COVID hit, as you mentioned earlier, and a lot of our clients went 100% remote. So instead of everyone being together, now they're all doing things over Slack or Teams or email in ways that never happened. And from that standpoint, what we really had this epiphany about was, wow, our clients, generally small to mid-sized companies, could really benefit from our technology or something like it. It would have to have extra modules and that kind of stuff. So we started turning a little inside, built a process to solicit feedback. I mean, we are in the research business, right? So solicit feedback from our clients and prospects about what was painful in their process and the way they work now that everyone was, for the most part, remote. And then we built innovative modules on top of our platform. And then we were kind of humble about it. We weren't hyping anything up. I just kind of went on a roadshow the end of last year. I just showed up in people's offices and said, I want to show you something and get your feedback. And the response we got was sort of like beyond our wildest imagination. We found it was hard to explain what we were doing, which is why what you do is a service to all industries. But explaining the concept of scalability and how to do it with tech was hard. But once we showed them like what it could be, you just saw everything start firing in people's brains and imaginations, right? So for us, we want to bring out of a couple tough years, we want to bring some, hope and optimism and excitement, beyond our own sandbox, but to our client sandbox in a way that they can really see and start dreaming for their own business what the next 3 to 5 years can be.
Excellent. That's interesting. I love that perspective. So you're stepping outside of your norm, but it's part of just innovating your business, right? And it's going to bring hopefully a new solution to your customers.
Yeah, it's diversification for us, which is great, but it's something that's not novel because we've been using it for a decade. And so, yeah, it's a great intersection where the interests of the client and us really overlap.
Excellent. Excellent. So one final question for you, Terrence. Again, you've been in the entrepreneur world for about 10 years. You've grown a really nice business. You've probably seen some obstacles along the way. You've probably had some sticky points that you've had to learn through. So what advice would you offer to that new person thinking about starting the business, or maybe just started, or maybe they've been at it for a little while and they're stuck? What advice would you give to somebody?
One of the hardest lessons I learned along the way was the thing. So we went from 6 figures of revenue to 7 figures to 8 figures. And we had, I could probably pinpoint exactly where a couple different transition points through that growth journey, where we had to realize in different ways that what got us to that point was not what was going to get us to the next step. And that was often painful and difficult. And my stubborn head was hard to come around to, right? Because, well, we always did this way and it was great. I had to shed a lot of that, right? That old way of thinking and start thinking about crafting a better tomorrow. So just that concept of just because it always worked before doesn't mean it's going to work on a new step in your growth journey. And not being afraid to make the hard decisions for the betterment of all the stakeholders in the business, right? It goes beyond the owner. It's the employees, it's the customers, it's, the achievement of the ultimate goal and mission. All that is really important. So, the little seasoning I'll put on that is don't quit so fast, right? I've seen some great companies that just the first sign of trouble, or maybe the second sign of trouble, it just got so overwhelming that they just packed it in and walked away. And I think that's tragic in a lot of cases. Sometimes it just takes a little further, like you're almost there. You're about to have the big breakthrough, right? Don't quit too soon, right? Do not quit too soon. So, it's not for the faint of heart, but those are some of the scars and the bruises I've accumulated over the decade. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. In the last piece you said, I love that especially. I think a guy about 100 years ago wrote a book called, his name's Napoleon Hill, and he talked about the rule of it's the 3 feet from gold model, right?
Yeah.
You're still close, just keep digging, right?
Yeah, you just can't see the light yet, but it's there.
Yes.
It's really there,
Yeah, excellent. Well, Terrence, excuse me. Really appreciate you joining us today. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us about your company and about your journey. To everyone listening and watching, we appreciate you joining us and look forward to seeing and hearing you on our next episode. Terrence, thanks again for joining us today.
Thank you, Todd.